I arrived home at 2 in the morning after a brutal 14-hour EMT shift, my uniform soaked with sweat and my body screaming for rest. All I wanted was to collapse into my own bed and forget about the car accidents, overdoses, and cardiac arrests I'd handled throughout the endless day. I pushed open my bedroom door expecting the familiar comfort of my space, but instead found myself staring at an empty room with nothing but carpet indentations where my furniture used to be. My mother appeared in the hallway wearing a guilty expression that immediately told me something terrible had happened. She cleared her throat nervously and explained they had sold my furniture to help my sister Sarah move to her new apartment because she actually needs stability right now. I stood frozen in the doorway, my exhausted brain struggling to process what I was seeing. The room that had been my sanctuary for the past 8 months was completely stripped bare. No bed, no dresser, no desk where I'd spent countless hours studying for my paramedic advancement exam, no nightstand where I kept my medical journals and alarm clock. Even the small bookshelf where I displayed my EMT certifications and family photos had vanished without a trace. My father, Robert, emerged from the master bedroom, his construction worker frame filling the narrow hallway as he crossed his arms over his chest. At 55, he still carried himself with the authority of a foreman who expected his orders to be followed without question. His weathered face showed no sympathy as he delivered his next bombshell. "And you'll be covering Sarah's nursing certification fee," he announced matter-of-factly. $3,900 due Monday morning. She's finally getting serious about her career, and we're all going to support her this time. I felt my knees buckle slightly as the full weight of their betrayal settled over me. For 8 months, I'd been contributing $600 monthly for rent, plus buying groceries and helping with utilities. I'd been working double shifts, picking up overtime whenever possible, sacrificing my social life and sleep to save money for my own apartment while continuing my education. Every dollar I earned went toward either family expenses or my future goals of becoming a paramedic and eventually owning my own home. My mother, Linda, stepped closer, her 52-year-old face creased with what she probably thought looked like maternal concern. Her part-time job at the dental office barely covered her personal expenses, which meant she'd always relied on others to fund her ideas about what the family needed. She'd been the driving force behind Sarah's various career changes over the past 3 years, from culinary arts to massage therapy to real estate, each transition requiring fresh financial investment from the family. "Max, honey, you have to understand." Linda began, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she used when she wanted to make unreasonable demands sound logical. "Sarah has been struggling to find her place in the world, and this nursing program in Portland is exactly what she needs. She's finally found something that could give her real stability and a good income." I thought about Sarah, my 25-year-old sister, who had changed career paths 4 times in 3 years. Each time our parents had rallied the family resources to support her new direction, and each time she'd lost interest after a few months and moved on to something else. The culinary arts program had lasted 6 months before she decided she didn't like working nights. The massage therapy certification had been abandoned when she realized how much physical effort the job required. The real estate license had been forgotten when she discovered she'd actually have to work weekends and evenings to succeed. "Where exactly did you think I was going to sleep tonight?" I asked, my voice carefully controlled despite the rage building in my chest. "I just worked 14 straight hours saving people's lives, and I come home to find my bed has been sold out from under me." Robert's face hardened even more. "You can sleep on the couch for a while. This is temporary until you get your own place anyway. Sarah needed furniture immediately for her new apartment, and we got $1,200 for your stuff. That money went toward her moving expenses along with another $500 we added to help her get settled properly." The math hit me like a physical blow. They'd not only sold my belongings without permission, but had actually spent more money than they'd received, creating a net loss while destroying my living situation. And now they expected me to cover nearly $4,000 for yet another of Sarah's career experiments. You went through my room and decided what to sell without even asking me. I struggled to keep my voice level, knowing that any show of anger would be used against me as proof that I was being unreasonable. Linda's expression shifted to defensive irritation. We knew you'd be difficult about it, and Sarah needed to move this week. We timed it for when you were working your long shift because we didn't want a big argument. Besides, you're always working anyway, so we thought you wouldn't even notice for a while. The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. They deliberately waited until I was away for 14 hours, handling medical emergencies, and literally saving lives to rob me of my most basic possessions. They'd planned this betrayal with the same careful timing they might use to surprise someone with a birthday party. I walked into what used to be my room and knelt down to touch the carpet indentations where my bed had sat for months. The rectangular impressions in the carpet were like crime scene evidence of what had been taken from me. My clothes weren't visible anywhere, and a quick check of the closet revealed it had been cleaned out completely except for my work uniforms, hanging on a single rod. Where are my clothes? I asked, though I already suspected the answer would be worse than I could imagine. Linda's face flushed slightly. We cleaned out some things you didn't really need and donated them to Goodwill. You have so many clothes that you never wear, and there are people who could really use them. We kept all your work uniforms and a few casual outfits. They're in a bag in the laundry room. I closed my eyes and counted to 10, using the same breathing technique I employed when dealing with hysterical accident victims. My entire wardrobe, accumulated over years of careful purchases, had been given away without my knowledge or consent. Clothes I'd bought for job interviews, casual wear, for my rare days, off-winter coats, shoes. Everything that represented my personal choices and style had been eliminated because my parents thought I didn't really need them. The magnitude of their violation was becoming clear. This wasn't just about furniture or money. They had systematically eliminated my presence from the house, erasing my personal space and belongings as if I were already gone. They'd made decisions about my life, my property, and my financial obligations without including me in any part of the process. Sarah called this morning to thank us. Robert added, apparently thinking this information would somehow make me feel better about the situation. She's so grateful to have furniture right away, and she's really excited about the nursing program. The instructor told her she has natural talent for patient care. I wondered if Robert actually believed the words coming out of his mouth, or if he'd simply repeated them so many times that they'd taken on the weight of truth in his mind. Sarah had received similar praise from the culinary arts instructor, the massage therapy teacher, and the real estate broker. Each field had recognized her natural talent until the moment she decided she didn't want to pursue it anymore. Standing in my empty room wearing a uniform that still carried the stress and exhaustion of 14 hours spent in ambulances and emergency rooms, I realized this wasn't really about Sarah's career at all. This was about my parents' complete inability to see me as an independent adult, deserving of basic respect and consideration. To them, I was a resource to be managed and allocated according to their priorities, not a person with my own goals, needs, and rights. The betrayal cut deeper than the financial loss or even the violation of my personal space. It was the casual assumption that my comfort, my possessions, and my financial future were all secondary to whatever Sarah claimed she needed at any given moment. It was the careful planning that had gone into timing this violation for maximum impact. Most painfully, it was the complete lack of guilt or understanding about why their actions might be wrong. I spent the next hour searching through the house, looking for any remaining personal belongings, and trying to understand the full scope of what had been done to me. The magnitude of their betrayal was expanding with every drawer I opened and every empty space I discovered. In the laundry room, I found a single plastic bag containing 3 casual outfits, 2 pairs of jeans, and some basic underwear and socks. Everything else I'd owned had simply vanished into their version of charity, While looking for my important documents in what used to be a shared office space, I noticed my father's desk drawer was slightly open. Inside, mixed with utility bills and insurance papers, I found a stack of mail that made my blood run cold. Bank statements, credit card applications, and loan documents, all bearing my name and social security number, but none of which I had ever seen before. My hands shook as I pulled out statement after statement, showing accounts I'd never opened. A credit card with a $4,000 balance, showing charges for car repairs, apartment, deposits, and tuition payments. Personal loan documents for $8,000, with my forged signature clearly visible at the bottom. Application after application, using my personal information, my employment history, and my sterling credit score to secure money I'd never requested or received. The charges on the credit card painted a clear picture of financial support for Sarah's constantly changing plans. $1,500 for a security deposit on her Portland apartment, $800 for car repairs when she'd claimed her transportation was preventing her from pursuing opportunities, $1,200 for tuition payments toward programs she'd never completed. Month after month of expenditures that had nothing to do with my life or my choices. I heard movement upstairs and quickly photographed every document with my phone before returning them to the drawer. My mind was racing as I tried to calculate the full financial damage. This wasn't just about selling my furniture or demanding payment for Sarah's certification. My parents had been systematically stealing my identity and destroying my credit for months, possibly longer. Walking outside for fresh air and privacy, I called my brother Jake for the first time in almost 2 years. Our relationship had deteriorated after he'd moved out abruptly, following what our parents had described as personality conflicts and unrealistic expectations about family obligations. At 30, Jake had always been more confrontational than me, more willing to challenge our parents' decisions and demand explanations for their behavior. Max. Jake's voice was surprised but pleased. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Is everything okay? I explained the situation with my furniture, the demand for Sarah's certification fees, and then the discovery of the fraudulent accounts. Jake listened without interrupting, but I could hear his anger building with each detail I shared. They did the exact same thing to me. Jake finally said, his voice tight with controlled fury. That's why I left so suddenly 2 years ago. I discovered they'd taken out a loan against my car title without my permission, and when I confronted them, Dad threatened to report my car as stolen if I didn't cooperate with their financial plans. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Jake's sudden departure, which our parents had characterized as selfish and irresponsible, had actually been an escape from the same financial exploitation I was now discovering. They'd spent 2 years painting Jake as the problem child who couldn't appreciate family support, while he'd actually been the victim of their systematic theft. How much did they steal from you? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. About $15,000 total, Jake replied. Credit cards, loans, even a line of credit they opened using my employment information. It took me 18 months to get my credit repaired, and I had to file a police report to get the car title back in my name. I felt sick thinking about the scope of their operation. This wasn't impulsive financial desperation or poor decision-making. My parents had been running a deliberate identity theft scheme, using their own children as victims, calculating that family loyalty and fear of confrontation would prevent us from seeking legal recourse. Jake, I found documents suggesting this has been going on for months, I said. There might be accounts I haven't discovered yet. You need to go to your bank immediately, Jake advised. Don't wait. Don't give them a chance to do more damage. Get copies of your credit reports from all 3 agencies and document everything before they realize you know. After ending the call, I sat in my car outside the house I'd called home for 8 months, staring at the building that now felt like enemy territory. The people inside weren't just demanding unreasonable financial support or making poor decisions about family resources. They were criminals who had spent months systematically destroying my financial future while presenting themselves as loving parents who simply wanted the best for all their children. I drove to the 24-hour ATM at my bank and was relieved to find my checking and savings accounts appeared untouched. But when I called the automated customer service line to check for any other accounts associated with my Social Security number, I discovered 2 additional credit cards I'd never applied for, both with significant balances and payment histories I'd never authorized. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was walking her small dog when I returned to the house near dawn. At 70 years old, she was the kind of observant retiree who noticed everything that happened on our quiet street. She approached my car with the determined stride of someone who had information to share. "Max, dear, I was wondering when you'd get home," she said, her retired teacher voice carrying both warmth and concern. "I saw the furniture truck yesterday afternoon, and when I asked your mother about it, she told me you were moving out suddenly for work. But that seemed strange since your car was still here, and you always tell me about your schedule changes." I explained that I hadn't been moving out and hadn't authorized the removal of my furniture. Mrs. Patterson's expression grew increasingly troubled as she realized she'd witnessed what amounted to a theft operation. "I should have trusted my instincts," she said firmly. "The whole thing felt wrong, especially when your father was directing the movers and your mother kept looking nervous. I've seen enough family drama in my 70 years to recognize when something isn't right." As Mrs. Patterson continued her morning walk, I realized that even the neighbors had sensed something inappropriate about my parents' actions. The violation wasn't just personal, it had been obvious enough that observant outsiders had questioned the legitimacy of what they were witnessing. My phone rang as I was sitting in the driveway trying to decide my next move. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, and when I answered, a professional voice identified herself as calling from a debt collection agency. "I'm calling to discuss a past due personal loan in the amount of $8,467, the woman said. "According to our records, this account is now 60 days past due, and we need to arrange immediate payment to avoid further collection action." I explained that I'd never applied for or received any loan from their company, and that someone had apparently stolen my identity to secure the funds. The collection agent's tone grew skeptical, as if she'd heard similar claims many times before. "Mr. Henderson, our records show this loan was approved based on verified employment and income information, and the funds were deposited directly into an account associated with your Social Security number. Do you have any reason to believe someone in your household might have applied for this loan using your personal information?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Someone in my household had indeed applied for the loan using my personal information, and I was beginning to understand that the furniture theft was just the most visible part of a much larger financial crime that had been committed against me by the people I trusted most. I spent the next several hours systematically documenting every piece of evidence I could find while my parents slept upstairs, apparently unburdened by any guilt about their criminal activities. Using my phone's camera, I photographed every fraudulent document, every forged signature, and every piece of mail that had been intercepted and hidden from me. The scope of their operation was staggering in its calculated precision. When my parents finally emerged around 8 in the morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table with printouts of my credit reports and a notebook full of documented financial fraud. Instead of greeting me with any acknowledgement of their wrongdoing, Linda immediately began preparing breakfast, as if nothing unusual had happened, while Robert poured his coffee and started discussing his construction project schedule for the day. "We need to talk about the fraudulent accounts you've opened in my name," I said, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. Robert's face darkened immediately. "I don't know what you're talking about, and I don't appreciate accusations first thing in the morning." I placed the credit card statements on the table between us, each one clearly showing my name, my Social Security number, and charges I'd never authorized. These accounts were opened using my personal information without my knowledge or consent. The signatures are forged, and the charges are for expenses related to Sarah's various career changes. Linda's face went pale, but instead of showing remorse, she became defensive and angry. "I only used your good credit to help the family," she snapped. "You're being selfish by questioning what we've done to support your sister. Everything we've done has been for the benefit of the whole family." The casual admission of guilt was breathtaking in its audacity. She wasn't denying the identity theft. She was justifying it as a reasonable family expense that I should accept without complaint. In her mind, my credit score and financial future were family resources to be allocated according to her priorities, not personal assets that belonged exclusively to me. "You've destroyed my credit and put me thousands of dollars in debt without my permission," I said, struggling to maintain my composure. "This isn't family support. This is criminal identity theft." Robert slammed his coffee mug on the table hard enough to make the dishes rattle. "If you don't stop causing problems and start thinking about someone other than yourself, you can find somewhere else to live today. I'm not going to listen to accusations and threats in my own house." At that moment, my phone rang with Sarah calling from Portland. Without thinking, Robert answered the call and put it on speakerphone, apparently believing that Sarah's voice would somehow support their position and make me more cooperative. "Good morning, sweetheart," Linda said brightly, as if we'd been having a pleasant family breakfast instead of confronting criminal fraud. "How's your new apartment?" Sarah's voice came through clearly cheerful and oblivious to the tension in the room. "Everything's great. The furniture looks perfect, and I already have my first job interview lined up. Thanks for using Max's credit again for the apartment deposit." The landlord said having someone with such a high credit score as a guarantor really made the application process smooth. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah had just casually confirmed her knowledge and participation in the identity theft, revealing that this was an ongoing conspiracy rather than a series of isolated incidents. She knew they were using my credit fraudulently, and she was actively participating in the scheme. "Sarah," I said into the phone, "I never agreed to be a guarantor for your apartment, and I never authorized anyone to use my credit for your expenses." There was a long pause before Sarah's voice returned, now sounding defensive and irritated. "Max, don't be dramatic. Mom and Dad explained that you're helping me get established, and it's not like it costs you anything since you're not actually paying the bills." The stunning ignorance of that statement revealed how completely my parents had manipulated Sarah's understanding of financial responsibility and personal accountability. She genuinely believed that using someone else's credit without permission was acceptable as long as the victim wasn't directly paying the monthly bills, completely unaware that every missed payment and high balance was destroying my credit score and financial future. After ending the call with Sarah, I made an appointment with my bank's fraud department and spent the remainder of the morning learning the full extent of the financial damage. The bank manager, a professional woman named Carol, reviewed my credit reports with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen identity theft cases before. "Mr. Henderson, I'm afraid the situation is quite serious," Carol said, her voice sympathetic but grave. "In addition to the accounts you've already discovered, there are 3 additional credit cards, 2 personal loans, and a line of credit totaling approximately $26,000 in fraudulent debt. Your credit score has dropped from 750 to 430 over the past 8 months. The numbers were devastating. Years of careful financial management, perfect payment histories, and responsible credit use had been destroyed in less than a year by people who claimed to love me. My dream of buying a house, advancing my career, and building financial security had been systematically demolished to fund Sarah's constantly changing whims and our parents' enabling behavior." Carol explained that as a victim of identity theft, I had legal options for recovering my financial standing, but the process would be lengthy and complicated. I would need to file police reports, work with fraud investigators, and potentially press criminal charges against my own family members to clear my credit and recover the stolen funds. The perpetrators appear to have had intimate access to your personal information and mail. Carol noted. In cases where family members commit identity theft, the emotional complexity often prevents victims from pursuing full legal recourse, which tends to embolden the perpetrators to continue their fraudulent activities. I left the bank feeling emotionally numb but strategically focused. My EMT training had taught me to compartmentalize trauma and focus on immediate action steps during crisis situations. I needed to treat this family betrayal like a medical emergency, prioritizing stabilization over emotional processing until the immediate danger was contained. My consultation with Detective Harrison, a classmate from high school who now specialized in financial crimes, confirmed that I had overwhelming evidence for criminal prosecution. The documented pattern of forgery, the recorded admissions of guilt, and the systematic nature of the identity theft created a strong case that could result in felony charges for both my parents. Max, I understand this is your family, but you need to understand that this level of identity theft represents serious criminal activity, Detective Harrison explained. The dollar amounts involved and the systematic nature of the fraud could result in prison time if prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. When I returned home that evening, I found that my parents had changed the locks on the house and placed my remaining belongings in black garbage bags on the front porch. A handwritten note taped to the front door informed me that I was no longer welcome in their home until I apologized for my accusations and stopped causing family drama. The cruelty of their response was perfectly calculated. After months of stealing my identity, destroying my credit, and selling my possessions, they were now making me homeless because I'd had the audacity to demand accountability for their criminal behavior. They'd escalated from financial theft to physical displacement, apparently believing that making me desperate would force me to accept their terms and drop any thoughts of legal consequences. Sitting in my car at midnight, looking at garbage bags full of the remnants of my personal belongings, I realized that my parents had forced a choice between family loyalty and personal survival. They'd made it impossible to maintain both my financial future and my relationship with them, betting that I would sacrifice my own well-being rather than pursue justice against family members. But as I drove away from the house I'd called home, I understood that they'd miscalculated the depth of their betrayal and underestimated my determination to rebuild what they'd destroyed. The people who'd raised me had revealed themselves to be criminals willing to sacrifice my entire future for their own convenience, and I owed them nothing more than the legal consequences they'd earned through their own choices. I checked into the Crossroads Motel on the outskirts of town, a clean but modest establishment that charged by the week and catered to people experiencing temporary housing displacement. The manager, Tony, was a 60-year-old former military man who took one look at my EMT uniform and garbage bags and immediately understood I was dealing with a family crisis rather than financial irresponsibility. "First week's rent is on the house," Tony said gruffly, handing me a key to a small but clean room with basic furnishings. "I've got 3 sons, and if any of them were in uniform working to save lives and got kicked out of their family home, I'd hope someone would show them the same courtesy." Tony's unexpected kindness reminded me that not all family relationships were built on manipulation and exploitation. There were people in the world who understood that helping others succeed was more valuable than draining their resources, and that real family support meant building each other up rather than tearing each other down. Over the next 3 days, I approached my situation with the same systematic methodology I used for complex medical emergencies. Instead of reacting emotionally to each new crisis, I documented everything, researched my options, and built a comprehensive plan for both immediate stabilization and long-term recovery. My coworker Amanda, a 32-year-old paramedic supervisor with 15 years of emergency services experience, helped me understand the legal landscape during our break between calls. She dealt with her own family financial manipulation years earlier and offered practical advice about navigating the intersection of family relationships and criminal justice. "Max, The hardest part about family financial abuse is that everyone expects you to just accept it because they're relatives, Amanda explained. But theft is theft regardless of DNA. You can't rebuild your life while people are actively destroying your financial foundation. Amanda connected me with attorney Rachel Martinez, who specialized in family financial crimes and offered free consultations for first responders facing identity theft. Rachel's office was filled with case files representing victims who'd been financially exploited by spouses, parents, siblings, and children, proving that family-based financial crime was far more common than most people realized. Mr. Henderson, your case is unfortunately typical of parent to adult child financial abuse, Rachel explained during our meeting. The systematic nature of the identity theft, combined with the emotional manipulation and housing displacement, creates a pattern we see frequently in families where financial boundaries have never been established or respected. Rachel reviewed my documented evidence and confirmed that I had grounds for both criminal prosecution and civil recovery. The forged signatures, intercepted mail, and recorded admissions of guilt created an overwhelming case that would likely result in criminal convictions and court-ordered restitution. During my research phase, I received an unexpected call from my Uncle Paul, my mother's older brother, who lived 3 states away and had maintained minimal contact with our immediate family for the past several years. Paul's voice was grim as he explained why he was reaching out. "Max, your Aunt Susan was helping your grandmother Rose organize her financial documents last week, and Rose mentioned some concerning conversations she'd had with your mother about money," Paul began. When Susan described what Rose had told her, we realized there might be a pattern of financial manipulation that extends beyond just your situation. Paul went on to explain that 2 years earlier, Linda and Robert had attempted to gain access to Rose's bank accounts and investment portfolio, claiming they needed to help her manage her finances due to her advancing age. When Paul had investigated, he discovered they were trying to redirect Rose's Social Security payments and gain power of attorney over her assets. "We had to get a restraining order to keep them away from Rose's financial information," Paul revealed. "They convinced her to sign several documents before we realized what was happening, and it took months of legal work to undo the damage. Your grandmother is sharp as a tack mentally, but they used family guilt and manipulation to make her think she was helping with legitimate financial planning. The revelation that my parents had attempted financial exploitation of their own elderly mother added another dimension to their criminal behavior. This wasn't desperate family financial management or poor decision-making under stress. They were serial financial predators who targeted vulnerable family members, systematically using emotional manipulation and family loyalty as weapons against their victims." Paul also shared information that explained some of the financial pressure driving their criminal behavior. Linda had developed a significant gambling addiction over the past 5 years, accumulating debts through online betting sites and frequent trips to nearby casinos. Robert had been covering her gambling losses by exploiting family credit and resources, creating a cycle where they needed constant new sources of money to maintain their lifestyle and cover previous debts. "Your father has been enabling your mother's gambling addiction by making other people pay for the consequences," Paul explained. "Jake was their first major victim. Then they started targeting Rose's inheritance. And now they've moved on to systematically exploiting you. Sarah isn't just the favorite child, she's been trained to be complicit in their financial schemes." Armed with this broader understanding of their criminal patterns, I developed a comprehensive strategy for exposing their behavior and protecting other potential victims. Rather than simply pursuing individual criminal charges, I decided to coordinate with other family members to create a unified response that would prevent future victimization and force my parents to face accountability from multiple directions simultaneously. I created detailed documentation packages for Paul, Uncle Jake, and Detective Harrison, each containing copies of all fraudulent documents, recorded conversations, and evidence of the systematic financial exploitation. The goal was to ensure that even if my parents attempted to manipulate or intimidate me directly, the evidence would already be distributed to people who could pursue justice independently. My discovery that Linda and Robert were planning to sell the family home and relocate to Florida with the proceeds added urgency to my planning. They intended to abandon all their accumulated debts and leave me responsible for the fraudulent accounts they'd opened, essentially stealing my financial identity permanently while escaping the geographical jurisdiction where their crimes had been committed. The upcoming family gathering for Rose's 80th birthday presented an opportunity to expose their criminal behavior to the entire extended family, simultaneously preventing them from controlling the narrative or isolating individual victims. With 20 family members expected to attend, including several who had law enforcement and financial expertise, the gathering would provide both witnesses and immediate support for holding my parents accountable. I spent my evenings in the motel room preparing a comprehensive presentation that would clearly explain the financial crimes, demonstrate the evidence, and provide context for the broader pattern of family exploitation. The goal wasn't revenge or public humiliation, but rather truth-telling that would protect other family members and force my parents to face the real consequences of their choices. The emotional weight of preparing to destroy my relationship with my parents permanently was balanced by the growing support I was receiving from extended family members who had experienced their own suspicious financial interactions with Linda and Robert. I wasn't just pursuing justice for myself. I was representing multiple victims and preventing future exploitation of vulnerable family members. The family gathering was scheduled for the following Saturday at Rose's house, a comfortable ranch-style home where she'd lived for 30 years and which served as neutral territory for family events. Rose had specifically requested that all her children and grandchildren attend her 80th birthday celebration, making it impossible for my parents to avoid the gathering without drawing unwanted attention to their recent behavior. I coordinated secretly with Uncle Paul and Aunt Susan, sharing my documented evidence and explaining my plan to expose the financial crimes publicly. Susan, who worked as an accountant for a regional firm, immediately recognized the sophistication of the identity theft scheme and offered to help analyze the financial documentation for the family presentation. Max, what your parents have done goes far beyond normal family financial problems, Susan said after reviewing my credit reports and bank statements. This is organized criminal activity that could have destroyed your financial future permanently if you hadn't discovered it when you did. Susan had been helping Rose organize her financial documents and had already noticed irregularities that suggested Linda and Robert had been attempting to manipulate Rose's finances again despite the previous restraining order. Several large checks that Rose couldn't remember writing, missing bank statements that had been redirected to different addresses, and financial documents that showed signs of tampering or alteration. Your grandmother is going to be devastated when she learns the full scope of what Linda has been doing, Susan warned. Rose has been generous with financial help for family members over the years, but she's always insisted on honesty and accountability. The gambling addiction and identity theft will represent a fundamental betrayal of everything she values about family relationships. 2 days before the birthday gathering, Sarah made an unexpected return from Portland, claiming her nursing program had been more challenging than anticipated and she needed to regroup at home before making her next career move. However, phone conversations I overheard through the thin motel walls suggested a different story involving unpaid rent, academic probation, and conflicts with her program supervisors. Sarah's return complicated my plans for the family confrontation, since her presence would add emotional complexity to the exposure of financial crimes she'd participated in knowingly. However, it also provided an opportunity to address her role in the identity theft scheme and potentially gain her cooperation in holding our parents accountable for their criminal behavior. I met with Sarah privately at a coffee shop near our parents' house, hoping to gauge her understanding of the legal implications of her participation in the identity theft and possibly convince her to cooperate with the investigation. Her attitude was immediately defensive and dismissive, suggesting our parents had prepared her for potential confrontation about financial issues. "Max, you're being completely overdramatic about some family financial help," Sarah said, stirring her latte with unnecessary force. "Mom and Dad have supported all of us over the years, and now they're helping me get established in a good career. You should be grateful they're willing to use your credit since you're not actually paying any of the bills." Her continued ignorance about the legal and financial implications of identity theft was frustrating, but also revealing. Sarah genuinely believed that using someone's credit without permission was acceptable as long as the original cardholder wasn't directly responsible for payments, showing how completely our parents had distorted her understanding of financial ethics and personal responsibility. Sarah using someone's identity to obtain credit without their knowledge or consent is a felony, I explained patiently. The fact that you're making payments doesn't make it legal, and every account opened in my name is damaging my credit score and financial future. Sarah's response was to accuse me of being selfish and unsupportive of her efforts to build a stable career. She claimed that family members should help each other succeed, and that my focus on legal technicalities proved I didn't really care about her well-being or future prospects. During our conversation, Sarah let slip several crucial pieces of information that expanded my understanding of our parents' financial manipulation. The nursing program story had been completely fabricated to justify the furniture theft and certification fee demands. Sarah had never enrolled in any nursing program in Portland, and the apartment she'd rented was actually being shared with a boyfriend whose drug-related legal problems had made them both desperate for quick money. Mom said you'd probably figure out some of the financial stuff eventually, but that you'd never actually do anything about it because you wouldn't want to hurt the family. Sarah revealed, apparently unaware that she was providing evidence of premeditated criminal conspiracy. The casual nature of her admission demonstrated how completely our parents had manipulated her understanding of the situation. They'd convinced her that identity theft was simply family financial help, and that any legal consequences were unlikely because I would prioritize family loyalty over personal justice. I recorded our entire conversation on my phone, gaining additional evidence of the criminal conspiracy and Sarah's knowing participation in the identity theft scheme. Her admissions would strengthen the criminal case and demonstrate that this wasn't impulsive financial desperation, but calculated criminal activity involving multiple family members. The evening before the birthday gathering, my parents attempted one final manipulation by having Sarah call me with a tearful apology and promise to help repay the fraudulent debts if I agreed not to pursue legal action against them. The timing was clearly calculated to pressure me into accepting their terms before the family gathering, where their crimes would be exposed publicly. "Max, I realize now that what we did was wrong, and I want to make it right," Sarah pleaded through tears that sounded genuine but felt strategically timed. "If you don't involve the police or lawyers, I promise I'll get a job and help pay back everything we charge to your accounts." The offer was tempting on an emotional level, since it provided a path toward financial recovery without the complexity and pain of criminal prosecution against family members. However, my conversations with Detective Harrison and Attorney Rachel had prepared me for exactly this type of last-minute manipulation, which was common in family financial crime cases. "Sarah, even if you had the ability to repay $26,000 in fraudulent debt, which you don't, that wouldn't address the criminal nature of what's been done or prevent similar exploitation of other family members," I replied. "This isn't just about money. It's about accountability for criminal behavior and protection of future victims." As I prepared my presentation materials for the next day's family gathering, I felt a mixture of sadness and determination that reminded me of the emotions I experienced when making difficult medical decisions during emergency calls. Sometimes helping people required causing short-term pain to prevent long-term damage. And sometimes the kindest action was the one that forced people to face consequences they'd been avoiding. The upcoming confrontation would permanently alter my family relationships and likely result in criminal charges against the people who had raised me. But it would also protect Rose's Uncle Paul Jake and potentially other family members from future financial exploitation while forcing my parents to confront the real-world consequences of their criminal choices. Rose's house filled with the warm chaos of a large family gathering, as relatives arrived throughout Saturday afternoon, bringing covered dishes, birthday gifts, and the kind of cheerful energy that had always made her celebration special. 20 family members ranging from teenage cousins to elderly aunts created the perfect environment for what I knew would be the most difficult conversation of my life. My parents arrived fashionably late dressed in new clothes that I now realized had probably been purchased with fraudulent credit. Linda carried herself with the confident demeanor of someone who believed she'd successfully managed a family crisis, while Robert maintained his usual gruff authority, apparently convinced that their manipulation tactics had resolved any potential problems with my discovery of their financial crimes. After Rose opened her gifts and we'd shared birthday cake, I waited until everyone was relaxed and gathered in the spacious living room before announcing that I needed to share important information about family financial matters that affected several people's relationships with my parents. The transition from celebration to serious discussion was awkward, but Uncle Paul and Aunt Susan immediately offered their support, having been prepared for this moment through our previous conversations. Other family members looked confused but attentive, clearly sensing that something significant was about to be revealed. Over the past several months, I've discovered evidence of systematic financial fraud committed by my parents using my personal identity and credit information. I began placing copies of bank statements and credit reports on the coffee table where everyone could see them. Linda immediately attempted to interrupt with protestations that this was inappropriate timing for family drama, but Rose held up her hand for silence with the quiet authority that had always commanded respect from her children and grandchildren. I methodically presented bank statements showing fraudulent accounts, credit card charges for expenses I'd never authorized, and loan documents bearing forged signatures. Aunt Susan supported my presentation with her professional analysis of the financial documentation explaining how the systematic nature of the identity theft demonstrated calculated criminal activity rather than impulsive, poor decision-making. The room's atmosphere grew increasingly tense as the scope of the financial crimes became clear. Several relatives exchanged meaningful glances, apparently recognizing elements of financial manipulation they'd experienced themselves but had previously attributed to misunderstandings or family communication problems. Uncle Paul then shared his own experiences with Linda and Robert's attempted financial exploitation of Rose 2 years earlier, including the restraining order that had been necessary to protect Rose's assets from unauthorized access. The revelation that this was a pattern of criminal behavior rather than an isolated incident caused audible gasps from several family members. At this point, Rose stood up slowly, her 80-year-old frame carrying the dignity and strength that had always made her the family matriarch. The room fell completely silent as she walked to a small desk in the corner and retrieved a manila folder that she'd apparently prepared for this exact moment. I've known about Linda's gambling addiction for months. Rose announced, her voice steady, but filled with deep sadness. I found betting slips and casino receipts when I was helping her clean her purse after she'd had too much to drink at Easter dinner. Rose's revelation that she'd been aware of the gambling addiction, but had been quietly investigating its scope, added another layer of betrayal to the already overwhelming evidence. She'd been protecting herself and other family members while gathering information about the full extent of Linda and Robert's financial crimes. I've been working with a financial advisor to protect my inheritance and assets because I suspected Linda would eventually attempt to access them again, despite the previous restraining order. Rose continued. But I never imagined she would steal from her own children's futures to fund her gambling debts. The family's reaction was immediate and unified. Multiple relatives expressed shock and anger at the systematic nature of the financial exploitation, while others shared their own experiences with suspicious financial requests or unexplained money problems that now made sense in the context of Linda's gambling addiction and Robert's enabling behavior. Cousin Michael, who worked as a police officer in the neighboring county, offered to help file criminal charges and connect me with specialized fraud investigators who could expedite the legal process. Several other relatives volunteered financial assistance to help me rebuild my credit and recover from the identity theft, demonstrating the kind of genuine family support that my parents had been claiming to provide while actually destroying my financial future. Faced with overwhelming evidence and unified family condemnation, Linda finally broke down and admitted to the gambling addiction and the systematic theft of my identity. Her tearful confession included details about online betting sites, frequent casino trips, and the escalating debts that had driven her to increasingly desperate financial crimes. "I never meant for it to go this far." Linda sobbed, her carefully maintained facade finally crumbling under the weight of public exposure. "The gambling just became so consuming, and I kept thinking I could win back the money and repay everything before anyone noticed." Robert's response was less remorseful, but equally revealing. Rather than accepting responsibility for his role in enabling the criminal behavior, he attempted to justify his actions as protecting Linda from the consequences of her addiction while maintaining family stability. "I was trying to keep the family together and manage Linda's problems without destroying everyone's lives," Robert said defensively. Using Max's credit seemed like a temporary solution that would buy us time to get Linda into treatment and sort everything out properly. The casual nature of his admission demonstrated how completely he'd rationalized criminal behavior as family management, apparently believing that good intentions justified identity theft and financial exploitation of his own children. Sarah's presence added emotional complexity to the confrontation since her involvement in the criminal scheme was both knowing and manipulated. When directly questioned about her awareness of the identity theft, she initially attempted to minimize her role, but eventually admitted that she'd known the accounts weren't legitimately authorized. "I thought it was just temporary financial help that families provide for each other," Sarah said, her voice small and defensive. "Mom and Dad convinced me that Max would understand and that we'd pay everything back before it caused any real problems." However, the most shocking revelation came when Sarah suddenly admitted that her pregnancy claims and nursing program story were complete fabrications designed to manipulate family sympathy and justify additional financial exploitation. "I lied about being pregnant because Mom said it would help everyone understand why I needed extra support." Sarah confessed, apparently unaware that this admission was providing evidence of additional criminal conspiracy. "And there never was a nursing program in Portland. I've been staying with my boyfriend and using the money Mom and Dad sent to help with his legal problems related to drug charges." The revelation that Sarah's entire narrative had been fabricated to justify theft and financial manipulation was the final piece of evidence that demonstrated the calculated nature of their criminal enterprise. This wasn't desperate family financial management or misguided attempts to help a struggling family member. It was systematic fraud involving multiple conspirators and fabricated emergencies designed to exploit family loyalty and emotional manipulation. As the full scope of their criminal behavior became undeniable, several family members began discussing immediate consequences and protective measures. Cousin Michael outlined the criminal charges that could be filed and offered to help coordinate with law enforcement agencies. Uncle Paul discussed legal options for protecting Rose and other vulnerable family members from future financial exploitation. The gathering that had begun as a birthday celebration had become a family intervention that exposed years of criminal behavior and forced accountability that my parents had been avoiding through manipulation and threats. For the first time since discovering their identity theft, I felt supported by people who understood that justice and family loyalty weren't mutually exclusive concepts. 3 months later, my life had been transformed in ways I could never have anticipated when I first discovered my empty bedroom and began unraveling the web of financial crimes my parents had committed. The criminal justice system had moved with surprising efficiency once Detective Harrison presented the comprehensive evidence package I'd assembled, and the family support that emerged from that devastating birthday confrontation had provided both practical assistance and emotional healing. Linda was sentenced to 18 months of supervised probation, mandatory participation in gambling, addiction treatment, and community service at a nonprofit organization that helped families recover from financial exploitation. The judge had been particularly influenced by the systematic nature of her identity theft and the targeting of her own children, calling it a fundamental betrayal of the most basic parental responsibilities. Robert received a more severe sentence due to his role in enabling the criminal behavior and his lack of genuine remorse during the legal proceedings. He was sentenced to 6 months in county jail, followed by 2 years of probation, during which he was prohibited from accessing any family member's financial information or participating in major financial decisions affecting other people. The court ordered full restitution for all fraudulent debts with monthly payments that would be managed through the probation system to ensure compliance. My credit score was being restored through victim protection programs, and the systematic removal of fraudulent accounts had already improved my financial standing significantly. Most importantly, I had moved into a comfortable 2-bedroom apartment with the help of Uncle Paul and Aunt Susan, who had provided both the security deposit and furniture to replace what had been stolen. The space was truly my own, furnished with items I'd chosen myself and secured by locks that only I controlled. My relationship with my extended family had grown stronger through our shared experience of confronting financial exploitation and supporting each other's recovery. Jake had reconnected with the family after 2 years of self-imposed isolation, and together we'd begun healing from the trauma of being victimized by the people who were supposed to protect us. The hardest part was accepting that seeking justice wasn't betraying family loyalty. Jake reflected during one of our weekly coffee meetings. Real family relationships are built on honesty and respect, not manipulation and exploitation. Rose had updated her will and estate planning to include protective measures that would prevent future attempts at financial manipulation, while also establishing a family trust fund that could provide legitimate emergency assistance without enabling destructive behavior. Her financial advisor had been impressed by the comprehensive safeguards we'd implemented to protect vulnerable family members. My career had flourished without the constant stress and distraction of family financial drama. I successfully completed my paramedic certification and received a promotion that included both higher pay and better benefits. The supervisor position came with increased responsibility for training new EMTs work that felt meaningful and aligned with my values about helping people build better lives. Sarah faced her own legal consequences when her participation in the identity theft scheme was fully investigated. Rather than receiving criminal charges, she was required to participate in financial literacy education and community service, while also contributing to restitution payments according to her limited income capacity. More significantly, Sarah had begun confronting her own role in the family dysfunction and working with a counselor to develop healthier relationship patterns. The removal of financial enabling had forced her to develop genuine job skills and personal responsibility for the first time in her adult life. I never realized how much mom and dad's help was actually preventing me from learning to take care of myself, Sarah admitted during a supervised family therapy session. Being forced to handle my own problems has been scary, but it's also shown me I'm more capable than I thought. Linda's participation in gambling addiction treatment had revealed the deeper psychological issues driving her financial crimes. The combination of therapy support groups and court-mandated supervision was slowly helping her develop healthier coping mechanisms and understand the devastating impact her behavior had on family relationships. Robert's progress was more limited, as he continued struggling with accepting responsibility for his enabling behavior and the damage it had caused to his children's lives. However, the concrete consequences of legal conviction and family estrangement were gradually forcing him to confront patterns of behavior he'd rationalized for years. The most healing aspect of my recovery was the development of genuine relationships built on mutual respect and honest communication. Amanda, my coworker who had provided crucial support during the crisis, had become a close friend, and eventually something more meaningful, as we discovered our shared values about family work and personal integrity. What attracted me to you wasn't just your professional competence, but your courage in standing up for what was right, even when it was personally costly. Amanda told me during dinner at our favorite restaurant. Too many people accept family dysfunction because they're afraid of the consequences of demanding better treatment. With my restored credit and stable income, I'd been able to purchase a modest house in a quiet neighborhood where several other first responders lived. The mortgage payments were manageable, and the sense of genuine ownership after years of family financial uncertainty provided psychological healing I hadn't expected. Most evenings found me working in the small garden behind my house, growing vegetables and flowers that reminded me daily of my ability to nurture things that belonged completely to me. The simple act of planting seeds and watching them grow had become a meditation on recovery, and the patient work required to rebuild what others had destroyed. Uncle Paul had become a mentor figure, helping me understand healthy family dynamics and financial boundaries that I'd never experienced growing up. His marriage to Aunt Susan demonstrated the kind of partnership built on mutual support rather than exploitation, providing a model for the kind of relationships I wanted to build in my own life. The greatest gift your parents' betrayal gave you was the opportunity to learn what real family support looks like, Paul observed during one of our regular fishing trips. Now you know the difference between people who build you up and people who tear you down, and you'll never accept manipulation disguised as love again. My work as a paramedic had taken on deeper meaning as I helped other families navigate medical emergencies with honesty and cooperation. I developed a particular sensitivity for recognizing family dysfunction and domestic financial abuse, often connecting victims with resources that could help them escape situations similar to what I'd experienced. The annual family gathering at Rose's house had been restored to its original purpose of celebration and mutual support, with clear boundaries about financial discussions and expectations about honest communication. The extended family had grown closer through our shared experience of confronting difficult truths and supporting each other's recovery from financial trauma. As I reflected on the year's events while preparing dinner in my own kitchen, I realized that the journey from victim to survivor had taught me invaluable lessons about the difference between family loyalty and family exploitation. True family relationships support individual growth and success rather than demanding self-sacrifice for others' poor choices. The most important lesson I'd learned was that protecting yourself from family financial abuse isn't selfish or disloyal. It's necessary for everyone's long-term well-being. Enabling destructive behavior doesn't help anyone heal or grow, while holding people accountable for their choices creates opportunities for genuine change and healthier relationships. My story had become a testament to the possibility of recovery from even the most devastating family betrayal and the importance of seeking justice when people we trust violate our most basic rights to financial security and personal autonomy. The path from discovery to recovery had been difficult, but it had led to a life built on honesty, respect, and genuine mutual support. Standing in my own home surrounded by belongings I'd chosen and paid for honestly, I understood that sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves and our families is the courage to demand the treatment we deserve and to build the life we've earned through our own hard work and integrity. The emotional journey from hope through pain to satisfaction and relief had taught me that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about creating conditions where healthy relationships can flourish and destructive patterns can be broken. The family I'd built with people who truly supported my success was worth more than any relationship based on manipulation and exploitation. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting yourself from financial exploitation? I'd love to hear your thoughts on how families should handle situations where love and manipulation become confused. Please share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video. If my story helped you understand the importance of financial boundaries in family relationships. Subscribe to my channel for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building healthier relationships, and share this video with anyone who might be dealing with similar situations. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that seeking justice for yourself often creates the opportunity for healing that benefits everyone involved.